Dr. Jazz.
Are you in New York or in
Dr. Jazz.
Westchester County, so it's just a little
Westchester?
bit.
Oh, beautiful. Oh man.
You know where that is, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Oh, beautiful, man.
It's very
Fantastic.
funny with Westchester. You know, I had students who, came from around the world to Manhattan to study in university, and then if they would come out to my house for a session or a lesson or something, it's a very short train trip. But then you get here and they're at my place and like there are deer walking around in the back and there's a river running in front. I mean, it feels like you're in the middle of the country someplace.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's so close, right? It's like half an hour ride, kind of, or 40 minutes, or it's
Yeah,
incredible. Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
love that. The north side of above New York City. I mean, that's so beautiful, man.
And how about you? Where are you right now?
I'm in Maribor, Slovenia, which is like, it's I'm in the vineyards. We live in it like kind of mountainy area, but hilly, and so next to the woods. So I
I've
love it.
actually, as I've been to Europe so many places so much, I've never performed in or even visited
No,
Slovenia. Yeah, I've
I'm
had students from there and stuff, but I've never actually been there.
no, I don't. I know I found out about you because a student of mine went to a master class of yours in Italy, I think in Siena or somewhere,
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
and he told me about you, and I was like, oh shit, man, that was like almost 20 years ago or something. So, uh,
Yeah.
and yeah, but yeah, you should come. We have a guest room. Just come hang
Okay.
and drink white wine, and that's it, and play guitar. Yeah.
It's very interesting getting gigs in different countries. It's like such a different thing. I mean, you must have experienced this too. Like, well, for example, an American getting a gig in Japan, if you have the person in Japan who's working for you, it can be fantastic.
Yeah.
And I know people that you would never have heard of maybe in Manhattan, where like I talk to them and they go to Japan 6 weeks a year and they make in that 6 weeks they make so much money from performances that ties them over for the whole year,
That's incredible. Wow.
and then somebody else who's very famous can't get a gig in Japan to save their lives because if they don't have the right person
Yep.
in Japan to do it. And it's interesting, like I played in Czech Republic really quite a lot, all these towns in Czech Republic, because I have friends in Czech Republic. And at one point, one of them was booking me. She was fantastic. So she'd get me all of these things. Plus I got a Fulbright to go there. So Czech Republic is great. But recently somebody else trying to book Czech Republic had the experience calling up venues.
Oh man, yeah.
The people they reached don't speak any English, like, got nowhere. I mean, they couldn't get a single thing. So,
Yeah, it's you have to. I mean, I've been doing tours in Europe for the last 20 years, but I do the booking, so you kind of establish the network. But yeah, it's hard. If once you get to know the people, then it's easier. But just to get in somewhere, it's so hard, and especially after COVID, it's gotten really, really heavy. I think in Europe, getting gigs,
yeah.
it's like a luxury nowadays to get a tour together. I think it's unless you're
Yeah.
a Schofield or the big guns and.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
it's
mean,
gotten really hard.
I was really lucky because from fall of 2013 through spring of 2014, I got the first joint Greece Iceland Fulbright Scholar Award. And so I was in Corfu, Greece for 3 months, Reykjavik, Iceland for 3 months, but I also performed and taught in Sweden, Portugal,
Oh, beautiful.
Poland, Austria. I mean, it was great, really wonderful. And at this point, I have enough musical friends there and former students, and so it's great to go to this place to see friends and all that.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's nice. I mean, all the gigs basically are in Europe for everyone almost, like the well-paid gigs, the festivals, and except the
yeah,
Canadian circuit. But yeah, but it's gotten harder. I mean, this gigging and getting gigs and booking, like everyone is complaining, like, ah, shit, man, it's gotten
Al- al-
worse. So,
although the nutty thing that I've been doing for the last I have to think it's a year and a half or 2 years. There's a baritone saxophone player named Glenn Wilson, and he and I recorded as to our knowledge, it was the first Barry sax guitar duo recording ever released that we know of. And actually, to this day, I've never run into another one. There's probably something I don't know about. But this many years ago, we did it, and we toured so long ago that we jokingly called our tour the Victory Tour, because that was right when Michael Jackson was doing his Victory Tour. Of course, our Victory Tour wasn't quite like Michael's, but he and I started booking actually U.S. tours, and we recently went on a 4-week tour where we hit 8 different states. It's pretty great, and you get to reach audiences who are big jazz fans. Audiences, we play someplace where the audience people have never heard jazz live, and that's great. You get them excited about it. Doing some concert and then a clinic like at a university, reaching some students. So the whole thing's great. But the only thing, I don't have to tell you this, but I mean, we're booking everything ourselves. Oh man, it's so labor intensive. It's so crazy.
I know. Yeah.
It's really nuts, Anyway, but it's been fun. I went so many years where almost all the work I did was Asia, Europe, South America, and then for a little while Canada, but not. I haven't done that so much for a while. But anyway, now getting some of these things in the U.S.
Beautiful.
But it's so great having Glenn, because we'll do gigs sometimes where we pick up a bass player and drummer, but our duo thing works so well. We can just show up someplace, there's hardly any equipment, go in there, play, and it's and it's killing, and the audiences love it. So, and it's not bringing a whole bunch of people around and having to book a lot of different hotel rooms and all this stuff. So
that helps. Yeah.
But I'm many years ago, I was in the BMI Jazz Composers Workshop for 3 years, and it was great. I wrote all these pieces for big band. They did read-throughs, but I knew a few people there, including a couple who became famous, like Darcy James Argue. People where either they already had their own big bands, or they were going to get a big band together. Well, I like writing for big band, but I just thought, man, they're crazy. And then proving me wrong, some of them get tours with their big bands. So I guess, you just got to have the vision and somehow make it happen.
Yeah.
But I'm not worried about touring with a big band just yet.
That's the next step. I mean, I wanted to ask you, what's happening on the band leading department, since we're talking about writing for groups and stuff like that. The last one I heard by you was So Rise Up, which is like a killer album. I love that album, man.
Oh,
have you released some? I mean, what's happening there?
Yeah, thank you for knowing about So Rise Up. So that same summer, I mean, it's like embarrassingly long ago. This is 2004. I recorded that, and in the same summer, I recorded a quartet CD with John Ellis playing saxophone, but also bass clarinet, different doubles.
Oh, fantastic.
Dan Weiss, but only playing tablas, not drum set, all tablas. Wow. And actually a wonderful bass player who I doubt you would have heard of, Brandon Owens. He was
I've heard of him. Yeah, sure.
He was one of my, I felt like in terms of raw talent, he's one of my most talented bass students. And he was such an interesting guy, because already, I think when he was in school still, he was getting called to do recordings with Terence Blanchard and played with Monty Alexander.
Exactly.
Everything was going great. And he's just a different kind of guy. And I heard some explanations by friends of his who knew him from high school about why he did this, but he just totally changed direction. And he was, I think, first playing electric bass on more contempt pop oriented thing. I don't know. And then I think he moved to, last I heard, he moved to California, and he's like producing all of these things. He might be a tremendously successful producer. I'm not that aware of everything happening in that world. But when he was still really killing on acoustic bass, he was a bass player on this. So here we have this record, and it was kind of interesting because I wasn't writing a standard jazz record and just having somebody play tablas. I was like writing stuff with the particular skills of the people
Okay.
in the group, and all these pieces that I wrote just for that group, we recorded. It was great, but I chose to release So Rise Up soon after that, and then I didn't get around to releasing the tabla thing for a while, and then one thing happened after another, and then at some point the music business started getting into this sort of nutty state where I'm thinking, and until recently, this has been a dilemma of mine. I'm thinking, like, you release a recording. Do you just have it streaming and you get no money? So you're just putting all this money into this thing. I mean, it's not all about the finances to me.
I know what you mean. Yep.
But I mean, the finances are a small part. But the big thing to me is, if it's just a streaming thing, and now I'm going to sound like really old, right? But if I think about, when I was about 13 years old, maybe, I bought the Coltrane LP called Coltrane with the blue cover, where he's playing Out of This World,
Yep.
Tunji, Miles Mode, Soul Eyes. And
Classic, yeah.
yeah, and that recording meant a lot to me. I didn't have very many LPs. I listened to it over and over again. And it wasn't just some random streams that I heard once in a while in any random order, and I didn't know who it was or who was playing with them. It was a thing. I mean, it was I don't mean to sound highfalutin, but it was an artistic statement.
Yeah.
Here's the photo.
Absolutely,
Here
I
are the
agree with
liner
you.
notes.
Yep.
Here's who plays on it. Here are the tunes. You listen to them in this order. Like, I know I'm nutty, but each of my records, I spent a lot of time deliberating on what order the tunes are in.
Absolutely.
It actually makes a difference. It's just like in a concert, people don't think about it, but the order you play the tunes in, they're not each these individual things. So anyway, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, because this whole crazy situation. And so I was sort of trying to figure out, well, would I release this as a CD? Would I release it streaming only? Then at a certain point, LPs, which at one point, I kept all my LPs. I love LPs, right?
Yeah.
But like one of the record companies I was on way back, Sunnyside, they were like dumping LPs. What are they going to do with these? And then LPs come back. I'm thinking, what, I release an LP? And so and then meanwhile, I got very busy with composing, performing. I was teaching. So my plate was pretty full, but still, it's unforgivable that I haven't been releasing things, especially because I have the tabla CD. I also have a few other things. I don't know if you ever heard my really old record, Hurricane.
Yeah, sure. It's fantastic, man. I listened to it today. The tunes on that one, it's like killing.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful album, yeah.
And that group, that was really a wonderful group where we played together. I mean, I wasn't whoever you want to say, Pat Metheny. I wasn't playing 300 concerts a year, but I would work hard. If somebody offered me a gig, I would make sure the people in the group could do it. If they couldn't do it, I would negotiate to have a different day for the gig. So when we did play it, it was that group. And when we went to the recording studio, we recorded a lot of stuff in 2 days. And Hurricane was maybe half of the things we recorded. And there's all this other stuff that was, I'm not saying it was better, it was just different, but there's a lot of really strong stuff. So, and then that's a funny thing, because that's way back in the 80s. Like, why would you release something from the 80s? It depends how you look at it. People look at recordings as a business thing. Like it's like a calling card you're going to give to a festival to try to get in. And obviously, like Keith Copeland isn't alive anymore. The people in that group aren't going to do a tour with me. But if the way you look at it is documenting an art form you care about,
that's what
that's
I think. Yep.
There's a very strong CD's worth of things from that to release, So anyway, so it's ridiculous that I've gone this long, and I want to tell you a quick anecdote about a friend of mine. There's a trumpet player who's my buddy, Dave Douglas.
Sure.
And he lives pretty close to me, and there was a while where he was training for some things that I run and I do all this stuff. So he and I would go running together. And being a little bit nutty, I had done this thing where I had a spreadsheet, and I was updating the spreadsheet, which showed every tune I've composed, when it was composed, who played the first performance of it, what recordings were made and which were released, and it's also organizing them because, of course, every tune that you write isn't a keeper, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are tunes I've written. I was very happy that I played them then. I'm never going to play them again. So I got that all organized. So it was just interesting to look at this thing, and I don't remember the number, but maybe I can remember it was, just to give you an order of magnitude, maybe it was 380 or 420. You know, there were a lot of tunes. Like, I've written a lot of music through my life. We could get into it, but I use every excuse to motivate me to write new music. Like when I've had students on ensembles when I teach, I don't bring in tunes I've written. For that group of people, I write all new music.
Oh, wow.
I mean, everything that can be a catalyst to composing more, right? So, you know, I had this list, and David's very prolific. He's written a lot of music.
He's crazy.
And so we're running, and just random topics are coming up. And I said something about, I just completed this crazy spreadsheet. He said, I've kind of got a list like that of tunes I've written. So we compared notes, you know, how many, and I happen to have the number in my head back then. And it was really interesting because it was the same order of magnitude, but he had composed somewhat more, like maybe 20 or 30 tunes more than I had out of roughly 400. In other words, pretty similar. So we're running, I said, so how many of those have you recorded and released?
Wow. Yeah.
Right. So he gave me this sort of quizzical look for a second, like almost like he didn't understand the question. Well, I mean, all of them. He said. I mean, I have a few new ones I haven't released yet. So I'm going like, oh my God, you know, because if you look at my list, you know, Night Work, Hurricane,
Yep.
So Rise Up. There's a duo record. The company ended up making it look like it's Glenn Wilson's record, but it's a duo,
yeah.
the two of us, and he did some of my tunes. There's a quintet of, you know, there are different records that my pieces are on, but there are a lot of music, including a lot of what I, not so humbly, I don't know, I think subjectively, a lot of the things that I've written since the last release are some of the best things I've ever written. And, you know, and we're not all around here forever. You know, if you die and they've never been recorded and released,
Yep.
you know, people don't, you know, they're gone, you know. So my resolution is that I'm going to release, well, first of all, I'm going to record a bunch of new things, release them, and release some of those things that I mentioned that I've never released. And I made this decision because from a certain perspective, it makes no sense to even release things now, from a certain perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
But what I thought about is, I'm just going to do it what I like. In other words, I love records that have tunes in order. So maybe I'm thinking about, let's say, LPs, maybe like signed limited editions, you know, 300 copies, and then a certain number of CDs, and then also streaming things, maybe offering like a high fidelity stream if people want it, because but any more people listen to crappy sounding MP3s, and that's what they're accustomed to. But I thought, you know, I'll never break even on this. Well, I'm not doing it to make money. This is something that means a lot to me. This is what I want to share with people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm impressed that you know my recordings, because I'm like a funny character in the jazz world in this respect. Well, I'm going to quote the guy who used to be the dean of the school where I was teaching. You know, I did a concert and the place was packed to overflow. And he had been to some of things I had done at clubs and seen the same things. Like Cornelia Street Cafe.
Sure,
The,
yeah.
the guy who booked it used to tell me that my performances and George Garzon's performances were the two things that got the biggest crowds.
Really?
Actually,
Wow.
actually, George and I played together sometimes there too. But
Really?
but even if it was just one of us or the other, the biggest crowds. But I've never gotten a gig at Village Vanguard. A bunch of my former students have, and I'm delighted for them. It's wonderful. I love the Village Vanguard. I'd be happy to play. But what this guy Martin Mueller, who was the dean, what he said about me when he announced me at this announcement, I think at this concert, is like, I try to remember. He used some expression like I had maybe he said a cult following. Well, I'm not a cult person by any means, but what he meant is there were a whole bunch of people that love my stuff. They would come to every time I played. So I've often had the experience, I'll convince a club, by the way, musicians listening to this are going to hate me. I'm just telling you, I'll convince a club, like I go to Denver to perform, and the club said, well, okay, we're going to pay you so and so much, and this percentage of ticket sales above that. I say, that's great. What about if you don't give me the guarantee, but instead of 70% of the ticket sales, I'll get 90%. So they said, great. Well, I would sell it out and do much better. So throughout my life, often I know that I'm going to make more money doing something for the door than anyone is going to pay me, which is nuts, right? I mean, every other musician's like, no, I want the guarantee. But this is what I mean, the cult following. I had a huge mailing list. People would come again and again. They would tell my friends. But the people who didn't know who I wasn't even a blip on their radar, right? Like for some people, I'm vanished. I'm not anywhere in their awareness.
Sure.
It's quite interesting because there are many people. I could think of a lot of people where I've sort of heard their name. I maybe heard one or two things. I've never heard them live, but I kind of know who they are. But it's like with me, usually people are either like avid fans or they've never even heard of me. And it's very interesting. I've never had a publicist, like back when Downbeat used to be a little different. They would they would review my records. I'd get 4-star reviews, but never a feature article, never even like one of those 1-page or half-page things. So anyway, it's okay. I'm not complaining. Like, it's been an amazing gift and continues to be, like, to live this life and do this music that I love. Oh my God. Like,
yeah, it's a privilege.
Wow. And by the way, I know some musicians who are very bitter and sort of entitled, and I deserve more than this. And I'm thinking like, wow, I'm really thankful that that's not my experience, and also, well, you get the idea. But anyway, I don't know if releasing a bunch of new records is going to change any of that. And if it doesn't, that's okay. But I hope that the people that enjoy the music, that love the music, they're not saying, well, I listen all the time to that thing that you released in 1986 or in 2004,
Exactly.
And yeah, so it's in my plans. It's going to take a little while, by the time they're releasing stuff, but I'm working on it.
Tough.
I do have some other excuses, and I just want to mention one that you might not be aware of. I took on this thing that I had no idea would turn into what it did. But have you ever run into my rhythm books?
No.
This is 6 volumes.
Oh, Lord. Are you kidding me?
And I know that I wrote them, so I'm obviously biased. But if you get a chance, like even if there's a library in Slovenia, something where you don't have to pay for them and you can just look at them, like if you're interested in rhythmic things.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah.
And I have to say,
quite obsessed about it, actually.
I'm not aware of anything that's even. I'm not aware of anything that's like them. I mean, you'll have to see. It's more than 2,000 supporting MP3s online.
Wow.
I have no. I'd have to look back how many hundreds of things transcribed, examples transcribed from all different kinds of music. I mean, of course, all kinds of wild jazz things, but also everything from J-pop to traditional African things to,
Wow.
I mean, like really, really wide-ranging stuff. Jimi Hendrix. I mean, all sorts of stuff, and but also like very systematic explaining things that, in general, even today, if I go someplace and give a workshop or clinic, the people have never thought about rhythm. People have thought about how to practice scales and modes and chord voicings. The harmony part, there's a whole structure.
Yep,
and if somebody wants to become a teacher of harmony, probably they've taken a class in it. There are all these textbooks they can use. But what I discovered is that when I created this rhythm curriculum at a university, I was sort of creating things from scratch. And then I did it for all these years, and I was so fortunate to have like this amazing, students, and learning all these things from what worked for the students and didn't, and I kept revising things. And then gradually I would run into people through the years in other countries, or even other parts of the US, but especially like a guy in Finland, a guy in Brazil, a guy, where they were trying to teach a rhythm class, and each of them had the experience of trying to create everything from scratch. So I did this nutty thing. And when I started doing it, I was just thinking, well, at a certain point, I was giving handouts to my students where it'd be like hundreds of pages I'm photocopying. I thought, I could do a little bit better. Let me organize it into books. But the can of worms you open, you think, well,
Yep.
well, okay, if I'm really going to show them about rhythmic superimposition, well, I should show them rhythmic superimposition in odd meters. Well, but I should do that where the rhythm superimpositions are grouped in cross rhythms. Well, I should do that showing how that works over different harmonic structures. Well, I should find all the examples where someone has actually done this on a recording. Oh, it's not only these jazz guys. There's a group of singers in Japan that did something that became a pop hit that used this crazy thing. Let me transcribe that. Oh, there's this, so the thing expanded. And I was directing a workshop in Italy for many years, probably where you're person who, and so I would see the same, friends and teachers who'd come with me, some of them from New York City, so we'd be on the plane together. And my buddy, John Ellis, saxophone player, every year he would see me, the first thing he says, how's the book going? And because every year I would think, I'm going to have this done in a year. And this went on like for year after year after year. And there got to be a certain point, like I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like working on this work, it really consumed a lot of my life. So on the one hand, that was some years that I didn't release recordings. On the other hand, I got this thing done, which,
it's incredible.
There've been like a bunch, I've been very flattered, really, like some famous musicians find out about this and buy it and then tell me, I'm using this for ideas for my compositions, or, I've never known how to work on so-and-so. Or it's a teacher like my buddy Christian Saalfellner from Graz, Austria, where these are the required textbooks for the course. But something that I'm happy about with these is that while they work great as the textbooks in the class, I always felt like, man, if you're like a super talented musician and you're living like some little island in Indonesia and your parents don't have much money and there's no way you can get to New York to go to university, like, what are you going to do? And so I thought, when I was writing these, I thought, I'm going to do the book where, someone would have to be, if someone didn't know any music, they didn't know how to write quarter notes, they would have to be very determined to get from the beginning of volume 1 to the end of volume 6. They have to be really, really care about it, really put in the work for years, be very, self-disciplined, organized. But if they did that, you'd have someone coming from some place you never heard of, where you like, your mind would be boggled all the stuff that they could do. So anyway, good. I gave my, but I'm not trying to wrangle money out from you. Find if there's some university or something where they could put it in their library.
I'll try. I didn't know about the books anyway. So I'll check
just
it out,
take a look
definitely.
at them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
The only thing that's crazy about them, I did them. I talked to a bunch of my students, although this was some years ago, and people said that for instruction books, these are people where everything they did was on their phones, or their iPads or something. If they were reading a book, they would never even get it from a library. They read it on their iPad. But a bunch of them at that time, I did a little survey, and a bunch of them were like, for a music book like this, I really want it to be a physical book. I can write notes on it.
Absolutely.
So the only problem is, in Slovenia, the books are super reasonably priced given what they offer, but you would pay almost as much for international postage just for the books. It would like double the price. So in some places, like in Italy, a whole bunch of people just got together and placed an order for like, I don't remember, 40 books. And it's crazy because if you put them in a couple big boxes, it doesn't cost that much more than just sending ones, So that's someday I should probably figure out getting them in PDF form or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But anyway, for now, just find a place. But I think you would find them interesting. I mean,
I'll try to find it.
They're pretty different. And there are a lot of drummers who have done great things with rhythm, but it almost never addresses song form and harmony. And so a lot of these look specifically at how you make this thing work in the context of song form and harmony.
That's important, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the other thing I've been doing a lot of, or at least one other thing I've been doing a lot of through the years. And man, when I got those finished, it's like, wow, they're really done. I mean, it was like great. And I have to say, they're holding up well. I'm not looking at things, regretting stuff. It's like, they haven't been out for that many years, but so far I haven't found anything I would change, actually.
That's fantastic, yeah.
And it's also fun because I think it's like different people are, okay, I'm going to just go on a funny little rant about people developing musically. Like, can you imagine, or you've probably heard the George Benson story, when he came to Manhattan and went into a club and heard Pat Martino, who looked like he was a kid playing. And can you imagine if you were a drummer age 16 and went to see Miles Davis and Tony Williams was on drums, you're going to be like, okay, that guy's got it, I don't have it. But I've noticed is sometimes the people who are like that, they kind of crystallize in a certain style, and it doesn't necessarily change that much. If you hear them when they're 50, they might be a lot like when they were 21, and it's still great. I mean, it's wonderful, right? But I think about somebody like Coltrane, even people that knew him, I mean, he was a little bit, I don't know what to call it, undistinguished. I mean, he wasn't the guy that everyone said, oh my God, he's going to be, and sometimes that kind of person, I notice, keeps evolving later on in life. Absolutely. And each one's got its benefits. I mean, I would have probably had a great time if I had been a 16-year-old Pat Martino. Probably would be terrific. But the thing for me is I still feel, mostly the way people say this stuff is cliched, but like I still feel like a student of the music. I mean, all the time I'm checking out things. I'm sort of nutty in being able to generate nutty ideas on my own. I think, wow, what if you do so and so? And then I'm off on this thing going down the path. But it could also be hearing someone do something that I hadn't thought of as interesting and just thinking, wow, where all places that can go. So one of the things about that is that I put no shortage of things in these books that I would have trouble playing still, or at least that are not like a really integrated part of my playing.
Yeah.
So in other words, I could benefit a lot by mastering everything in the books. And I also feel great that, although a lot of them don't know about them, I'm sure, the students of mine through the years, even people who've taken 4 semesters of my rhythm classes, if they want to get deeper, these are like, I could never cover all the stuff in a class. You wouldn't have enough hours in a day. So it doesn't mean that someone has to do everything in them.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
If you're interested in a certain kind of field modulation, or thing I call transformational analogs, one of these particular topics, you can go there and then get deep into it. So
Yeah, you can work on that stuff for years, just one subject, like you said, and finding all nuances, and I mean that's it's an
yeah, and I've often said this thing to my students. It's interesting, you don't have to be great at everything, but if you find some particular thing that really grabs you, and it's fun, like you dive into it, I mean, it's only a matter of time. People don't realize this when they're really young, but it's only a matter of time, and then you'll be the person where if anyone who cares about this particular thing, you're the one they want to, check out with that.
Yeah.
So anyway, music's pretty wonderful thing. I have all these friends in areas other than music, and they talk about, well, they're looking forward to retiring, or and it's like, man, if you suddenly could give me, who will I be jealous of? Not musically, not for the groups, none of that, but just give me Pat Metheny's touring schedule. I'm on board, man. I'll play. I'm happy to do it. It's super energizing to me.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other thing that's funny, the thing about the energy that's funny is, this is a story I've told a lot of people, but there was only one thing I was sure of at a certain point in my life, and that's that I never wanted to teach music. I had all kinds of things that I was interested in, and I definitely wanted to play music and compose, but I had this image of teaching music, like standing up there and saying stuff to bored students and all this stuff. And the drummer in my group, Keith Copeland, was incredibly supportive, and he never asked me for anything. And, he was the ideal person to work with. He was a beautiful cat. He died some years ago, but he and I have so many times together. He was staying at my house when 9/11 happened. I mean, so we went through a lot of crazy stuff together. But he asked me as a favor. He said, he had this little nickname for me, but anyway, asked me, can you do me a favor? So I'm like, yeah, whatever it is for you, So I'm going on this tour. I think it might have been, I might be embellishing the story. I know sometimes when I was teaching for him, he was going to Japan with Hank Jones, but I'm not sure if that was the first time. But anyway, he was going on this tour, and he said, we do all of this crazy stuff, rhythmic stuff in our group, and I'm teaching a rhythm class. Can you fill in for me? So I remember I had a moment like, oh, well, I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I agreed. And the very first class, 2.5 hours class back then, at the end of 2.5 hours, because these were like amazing students from all over the world, very motivated, really interesting, different backgrounds. And I would throw something out there to them, and the feedback they would give me, it was incredible. And I remember I was walking down the street, this like in Greenwich Village in New York, walking down the street after the class, and all these ideas are flying in my mind, and I'm thinking about things I can compose and things I can practice. Like, wow, this teaching thing's not so bad. So that's the other thing for me. I guess if there's one comment I often get about my teaching, I'm not saying everyone loves my teaching, but often people will say something about, like, they can't believe how enthusiastic I am, because I totally love it. Like, it's to share this stuff with other people. Wow, it's wonderful. Yeah. So I'm lucky that I stumbled into that, and that was cool. And you probably know many of my people. When I say former students, some of them took guitar lessons with me, but also people on all different instruments took private lessons or took my rhythm classes, and it's really killing. Like, whether it's a recording or going to hear people live, and it's someone you remember when they were just out of high school, and they're tearing it up. They're taking care of business, and like, you're checking them out, like, Wow, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about doing that, It's really fun.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's nice to teach. I mean, I've been teaching as well for 25 years, and I really love it. And I think students notice this. That's why they love coming to your classes or to the one who loves doing this, because they feel the energy and like, okay. And of course, if you have the knowledge as well, that helps as well, of course. So,
yeah.
that's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, I think.
Do you end up teaching a lot in Slovenia?
Yeah, I have my own guitar school. I've had it for
Oh.
16 years already here. So,
Wow, how
yeah.
cool.
And I have other teachers employed
And,
as well.
and,
So.
and so it's all guitarists in the school.
Yeah, and we have a drums and piano and bass as
Uh-huh.
well. So it's kind of, but we
Yeah.
teach everything. I teach everything from Meshuggah to Kenny Burrell to whatever to Chris Potter solos or whatever. So it's just
Yeah.
like a really wide range to the Beatles, and I mean I love
That's great.
all the music. So
Yeah,
I really like it. So
yeah. That's funny. When you say Meshuggah, I think about Tigran Hamasyan,
oh sure, yeah.
who was in my class.
Oh really?
And
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, and
That
I
explains a lot then.
no, I don't want to take credit because he was already amazing. A week before my class started, the drummer who was in my quartet then, Ari Honig, said, "Hey Rory, there's a cat who's going to be in your rhythm class."
Oh, Tigran was in Ari's band. Yeah, of course. Right?
Yeah, and he said, "There's this cat he's a bad dude. Wait till you hear this guy." So I discovered that he was playing. Maybe it was at the Jazz Gallery. There was someplace he was playing. So a few days before the class, I went and heard him. I said, "Okay, here's someone who's going to do beautiful things musically." But anyway, I remember he was a great student. But by the second semester, when I would have gotten into the stuff I thought would maybe interest him more, although he seemed interested in all of it, but by the second semester, he'd gotten this tour, and he never came back. But I mean, it all worked out. But anyway, I remember when he was going to transcribe a project, it was a Meshuggah piece, which back then, this is a long time ago, back then, that wasn't so much common. Now it seems like most jazz musicians, if they're interested in wacky things, they know of these guys. But at that point, it was a little bit obscure, and that was what he transcribed. So it was funny.
I didn't know this. Wow.
But the other thing that's interesting is, I don't know if you found this, and maybe you have to teach for quite a while to see this, but I've noticed that generally my students who've gone onto the greatest things musically were very open and into doing everything, like everything stylistically.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I mean is sometimes I've had a student who's like, no, I'm not interested in playing changes. I only play avant-garde or something like that. And some of those students become pretty good. But do you know singer Becca Stevens?
Sure, I love Becca. Yeah,
Okay.
I know her.
Yeah. So Becca's like, and Robert Glasper's a great example also. But Becca, I remember vividly, like she was in my class with some amazing instrumentalists, and I had Vijay Iyer as a guest in the class, and he had given me some of his pieces in advance, which I gave to the students. And some of these killing horn players had learned the pieces very well. But Vijay's at the piano reading it through, and these people are playing it, and Becca is singing this stuff like stronger even than the horn players, like so masterful. And I had an advanced rhythm ensemble, and that year I chose 4 vocalists to be part of it. The instrumentalists were incredible too, and so Becca was one of them. And she brought in like wonderful music. She was great at everything. And at her senior recital, Billy Harper, my buddy, is a tenor sax player, and she had been in Billy's ensemble. And of course, as you can imagine, she was wonderful in Billy's ensemble. And there were a lot of other teachers came to her recital because they were like, okay, this person, she is amazing, And some of them, I remember afterwards, they were stunned because I knew this about her. She has the North Carolina, like the kind of folk music,
Yep.
So she did certain beautiful things that kind of came out of that tradition. And some of the teachers, they loved it, but they were just like, oh, I thought she was just into the kind of thing I do, and so that was like a great example to me, someone where everybody who worked with her thought she was the best person doing their thing, but their thing was different than someone else's thing. So she just mastered it all, and then she used everything to turn into what she has turned into. And Robert Glasper, I think there are a lot of people that don't know what a strong, straight-ahead jazz player Robert Glasper is.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But I mean, this guy's just great, And do you know Mike Moreno?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and those two were right out of high school.
Yeah, from Houston. Yeah.
They were in my rhythm class the first semester, and sometimes the way high school, young people like that, they have little nicknames for each other. They're teasing each other. It sort of seemed a little. It seemed like a little bit childish. I wasn't. I minded. I just sort of thought, wow, these guys sort of ready for the whole university thing? And after a few classes, we had a session where we played in class. It's like, okay. I mean, already it's like, okay, these guys are, they know they're going to turn into great things, which they did.
Interesting.
So, but it's almost everybody. So I just think that's kind of a lesson for someone who's just starting out. It's like, no, you might not want to become the great Brazilian guitar player or whatever it is, but like there are things you can get from each of those,
Absolutely.
and especially early on, it's really great to. So when you say about how you're giving the student this whole range of things,
Yep.
it's like I think that's terrific. Yeah.
I usually show to my students, I obviously I love CDs still. I'm a CD person, I grew up with that, so I have a huge collection. But for the practice, I listen to Spotify as well, right? I mean, and I have a playlist, and then I show it to my students sometimes, and they're like, "What? There's not only jazz?" And I'm like, "Shit, man, no, it's like from Sting to Simon and Garfunkel to the Beatles to obviously all kinds of jazz to Stravinsky to the Roots and De La Soul and."
Yeah.
And they're like, really, "Oh, you listen to this?" I was like, "Sure, it's good music." I mean, and they're really, this whole barrier or world opens up. They're like, "Oh shit, man, okay, so I can play jazz or whatever, but still listen to hip hop or Eminem." I was like, "Yeah, it's obviously, yeah."
Yeah, that's terrific.
It's nice to see that.
Yeah.
I witnessed this the first time I went to New York, and I stayed with David Binnis. You know Dave, right?
Sure.
And we played together quite a lot, and he showed me I invited him for a tour back in 2003 in Europe, and he had an iPod. We didn't have those in Slovenia, and I said, "Can I check it out?" And he had Beyonce there and Christina Aguilera on there, beside all the jazz and stuff. And I was like, "Shit, man, come on, what is this?" And he's like, "Well, it's really good music."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh fuck yeah, okay, so." It's cool that you can listen to that, of course. Like, okay,
Yeah.
that was for me an eye opener. I was like, okay, if this cat does that, then I guess it's okay, So
Yeah.
it's funny.
No, I don't. I mean, there's, of course, Brazilian, Afro-Cuban, and Indian music and African music, and there's a bunch of classical things. Some of them kind of obscure that I totally love. But I have to say, I guess maybe the generation I am in, like early on, I played in an amazing funk band. It was a little bigger than a funk band. It was called Joe Keel's Action Orchestra in Colorado, and we did different kinds of things. But the percussionist was brothers with the keyboard player in Earth, Wind and Fire, and I have this nutty fantasy that, not for any commercial reasons at all, just because I love it, that I'm going to someday get a funk band thing happening, but a funk band like I'll just say the abbreviated thing is a 21st century funk band, like some different things than we've heard. But I mean, I listen to Tower Power and Earth, Wind and Fire, and when I was a kid, I used to go. James Brown would play at my neighborhood theater in Brooklyn. Every year when he played, I'd go and hear him. That was amazing live shows back then.
Yeah.
So and I never got to hear Jimi Hendrix live, but I notice that Jimi Hendrix to me, and you probably don't hear hardly any Jimi Hendrix in my playing.
No.
But Jimi Hendrix to me holds up like at an amazing level. Like there's nothing about Jimi Hendrix that sounds dated to me.
Yeah, for me as well. Yeah. I listen to, let's say, All Along the Watchtowers, the solo or the tune, and it's like, damn, man.
Yeah.
You know, or whatever, every tune actually, playing the blues, whatever. Yeah.
By the way, just to go off, I hope you're okay. I'm just going off on little digressions.
Yeah, sure.
So just to go off on a digression about that, I was thinking about this because Jimi Hendrix was doing stuff in the late 60s. So that's nearly 60 years, 55 years ago or something, 55, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
All right, think about 55 or 60 years before Jimi Hendrix. So you're talking about 1913 or something like that. I have to say, when I was young and playing, kids my age, there was nobody from 1913 that we were all listening to saying, man, that guy's amazing, or she's incredible. No way, 1913, that's some old. So, but I mean, I've almost never run into a student where like, nah, I don't listen to Jimi Hendrix, that's old fashioned. Like today, a student will hear a live Jimi Hendrix recording they never heard, and their head's gonna explode. Like they can't believe, like, my God, this guy's so creative, it's so brilliant. So that he's an interesting character that way, that he, and sometimes people that know that I'm into Jimi Hendrix think I'm into, and then they list a jillion different heavy metal guitarists, and some of them I've heard, but everybody, I mean, no disrespect to the style and all this, but it's like Jimi Hendrix that's still a whole different thing,
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if you're a guitarist, I mean, that's like it's almost like a must that,
Yeah.
He was really strong. I mean, you hear a guitarist like, John Frusciante of Red Hot Chili Peppers or John Mayer or all these guys, you hear like, man, they really dug into Hendrix. And then it's like, you talk like yourself. I would not hear Hendrix in your playing, or, like Adam Rogers or someone, they love Hendrix as well. And maybe you don't notice it, but, everyone loves Hendrix, I think. There's not one guitarist who would be like, okay, nah.
Yeah.
Really.
By the way, about Jimi Hendrix, I wonder if you've ever heard my friend, one of my best friends, one of my favorite guitar players, Tuck Andrus. He plays in a group, Tuck and Patty.
Oh,
Okay.
I saw him live like 3 times in Italy, so yeah, he's
Okay. When I mentioned my former dean calling me like a cult following or something like that, I mean, Tuck is an interesting guy because
they recorded a tune by you, right?
yeah, they did, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But he's an interesting guy because the people that know him are like, I'll see people, with a list of like the 10 greatest jazz guitarists ever, and he's clearly on the list. I mean,
you should be up there. Yeah.
But there are a lot of people you could mention his name to, young people they've never even heard of. They've never heard the name, let alone listen to him. But anyway, I just mentioned that because you probably have heard him play a Jimi Hendrix tune. I mean, he has a few Jimi Hendrix tunes he plays, and isn't it interesting how he captures, in a different way, but he captures some of this Jimi Hendrix magic,
The spirit, yeah.
on an old 1948 L5, like with no effects, right? I mean, but yeah, you can. So he's somebody where I actually hear he got, you can tell he's got some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
he's really good. I mean, it's a shame. He's like you, he should record more. I wish I could do this interview with Tuck as well, because I really would like to ask him. Like, man, he did those 2 amazing solo guitar records, right? The Christmas one, and then the one Reckless Precision, which is a masterpiece.
Reckless Precision is astounding, right? Like insane.
That's crazy, man. And I wish he's done more of that. It's like virtual Joe Pass or something. It's.
And I hope he still will. I think he might. He might still. And by the way, I mean, I'm happy to mention to him and see if he's interested. I mean, if he would be open to doing it, I'll put you in touch with him.
Oh, please, man! I'd be so happy. I'm such a fan.
Yeah,
I've been such a fan.
He's got a lot of stuff on his plate, but he's a wonderful guy. And he would definitely be interesting to interview.
Oh man, yeah. There's not
You,
many
you,
interviews by him actually. So
yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, he was a key figure in my musical life. I don't know if you know.
No, no, no. Oh, please tell.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, I started listening to. I had just a few recordings. I had a few things in my early life. You know, I wrote a report about Rossan Roland Kirk and the little experimental community school I was in. The teacher somehow got Rossan to do an afternoon Village Vanguard performance just for our class, and then sit around and answer our questions.
Wow, that's
Right,
amazing.
and then we had Jackie Byard, the pianist, coming once a week and doing a music class with us. You know, we were singing Blue Moon, but you know, at the beginning of each class, he would just play some solo piano thing, and you know how he had the whole
Yeah.
gamut, stylistic, the whole history of the music. So he'd be doing stride piano, you know, all kinds of things. Anyway, I got into the music, and I bought a very few LPs. I mentioned the Coltrane one, Thelonious Monk live in Italy. There's just like a few recordings, right? So I totally loved music. I totally loved jazz, and I thought it'd be wonderful to learn how to play jazz. My mother had gotten me as a present like this little acoustic guitar. I learned from a neighbor, very nice neighborhood kid, you know, showed us a few chords. But I mean, I didn't have anything much happening. And I really wanted to learn jazz, but I didn't know how to go about it. And my father had a wonderful friend who was like a Tin Pan Alley composer. It's funny, he had a few friends so I knew these people from this older generation who actually, at the time, I wasn't that interested, but they were like, you know, I knew Artie Shaw when I was a
Really?
kid. I knew,
Oh, wow.
you know,
That's incredible.
so anyway, this guy, Dick Manning, I asked him, like, you know, I'd love to learn how to play jazz, you know, who should I study with? And he gave me this advice, which I have to say, I don't know that I agree with his advice in hindsight, but he said, you know, you should learn classical music first. Classical is the foundation. Well, it's funny because as a pianist, like, have you
Maybe
noticed?
as a pianist, yeah.
I noticed that jazz pianists who have a classical background, they often have certain things about their touch
Yep.
that you don't hear from people that just took it up later. You know, like the kind of Bill Evans, that whole thing, right?
Absolutely.
But with guitar, although like, I don't know, Ben Monder, you know, there are people where the classical thing is in the jazz thing more. Of course, Ralph Towner. I mean, but for me, actually, classical guitar and jazz guitar are two wonderful, almost just different instruments, you know?
Absolutely.
And, but I had a fantastic classical guitar teacher. I found out, you know, I played for a week with Larry Coryell, and I found out that this was who Larry Coryell had taken classical guitar lessons with too. And this guy had world famous touring classical musicians, but here I am, what do I know? And so he was my teacher. So through high school, I'm learning classical guitar and listening to John Coltrane, you know, and right around the end of my senior year in high school, I started just trying to figure out what the heck's going on with jazz and how to play, you know. I found one Joe Pass book, you know, and there's like, I'm just kind of piecing the things together. There was a kid in my high school who would play out in the yard, and I'd see like a chord voicing. I was just trying to get any information I could get, and starting to try to learn things from records. And I bought an electric guitar from Manny's Music. It was an absolutely terrible choice of guitars. The guy there was very nice, and he sold me. Actually, I'm going to tell you in case any of people listening to this know what this is. An Ovation Breadwinner, it was called. Like the worst guitar for jazz you could imagine, right? I mean, he could have just sold me a Telecaster, a Stratocaster, which weren't really jazz guitars, but this was like this nutty, you know. So anyway, I have an electric guitar, and now I'm trying to learn more. I'm trying to learn stuff from records and all this stuff, like the summer after I graduated from high school. But I went to university thinking I was going to become a marine biologist.
Oh, wow. Okay.
but I brought my electric guitar and my amp. So I check into my dorm room, and in this dormitory on the same floor, after a day or so, I run into this guy who's staying on the other side of the floor. So, oh, I saw you got a guitar. I said, I play drums. So he and I started becoming friends. And very soon after, this was probably within a couple of days, he said, there's this, it was called the Stanford Studio Band. Studio Band, I don't even know what, it was like the jazz band, but they call it the studio band. He said, well, there's auditions happening for the Stanford Studio Band. Well, I'm going to go to it. Why don't you come with me? I had this humongous amp, which was insane to have, this big heavy amp. So I remember I rolled this whole thing to the rehearsal, and I had never played with other people before, really. I had figured out stuff about chord construction, and I had, for a guitar player, I had reasonably good reading because of my classical guitar stuff. But here I am, and I show up, and there are music stands and charts. Say, oh, okay. And there's another guitarist there. Ooh, and I've never played with you. This is a pretty big confidence breaker, right? So we start playing, and there's like a place for a guitar solo, and the other guy points to me, so I kind of take it. So this rehearsal, I'm able to get through the charts and not get lost. I'm playing with other people. It's like, wow, this is really exciting. It's really great. And every time this other guy, I didn't really hear him play much, and he keeps giving me all the shots. This is a long time ago, and I can remember, I'm sorry, I'm giving you a lot of detail because I remember it so vividly.
Oh.
The last tune of the rehearsal, they didn't have a chart for. I can tell you it was Round Midnight by Thelonious Monk, which I didn't know. So I didn't play it, the other guy played it. That was Tuck Andrus. Tuck, I can't tell you, so Tuck was a few years older than me, so maybe he was sort of 20-ish, 19 or 20. You'll never get to hear a recording of him at that age, but oh man, he already had it. So I had listened, by that time I had listened to George Benson, Wes Montgomery, John McLaughlin, but I had never been in a room in a rehearsal with one of them, let alone someone who's like a few years older than me and playing it was so amazing, right? And if I think about this, I can almost well up with tears about this, because think about the kind of guy he is. Right? Any other person who's at his level, and there's some kid who's come to the rehearsal and he's slugging his way through these charts and he can't really play. Anyone who's got an ego is just going to do this thing and then the guy's going to leave, right? And he's like a very compassionate, aware kind of guy. I think he knew exactly what was happening, and he did exactly what it would take to have that rehearsal be that experience for me. But of course, I heard this guy play, so he became like a best friend, and just to be around him. I could say I didn't take formal lessons with him, but that's not true. I did take one lesson back then. I said, Tuck, I want to take a lesson. How much do you charge for an hour? So he told me the price. So I said, oh, could I possibly take one for 45 minutes? So that 45-minute lesson became a 6-hour lesson. He charged me for 45 minutes, and he spent 6 hours with me, nonstop. He said, he describes I was like a sponge. And you'll laugh at some of the things, because, for example, the idea about modes, I had figured out modes. I didn't know that anyone else had figured this out, and I didn't know that they had names. So, so at one point I'm showing him this thing. Well, notice what happens. He said, yeah, that's called Phrygian. It's like, oh, you mean someone else has discovered this, So he said I was like a sponge because I was so ready for all this input information he was giving me. So, in a way, through my life, I could say, he's been a great friend, but just an inspiration. And, he and I have had these long letters back in postal mail, long letters back and forth, and, all kinds of nerdy guitar stuff. And he's he's just an astounding person, an astounding musician. Really, I mean, people throw this word around, but I mean, he's really a genius, you know. And I mean, there's stuff that I got, ideas I got from him then that are still getting unpacked all these years later.
Yeah.
So anyway, so just to carry on about Tuck, but if anyone listening to this hasn't heard Tuck Andrus, this is the guy. And the other thing I want to say about Tuck Andrus, because this is an interesting thing to me, I think this is especially true of guitar. It's true of a lot of instruments, but especially of guitar. And I wonder if you notice this. I think guitar, it might be a pretty easy instrument to play badly and a pretty difficult one to play well, like in a jazz context. And guitar players tend to be very hard practicers and often kind of analytic more than people on some other instruments. And there are a bunch of guitarists, including people where I love them musically, where it's entirely clear that they practice a certain thing like crazy in a practice room, and then when you go to a gig, they're going to play that thing on the gig. I mean, that's not a bad thing. But that's a really guitar kind of thing. Yeah. You know, but if I listen to Sonny Rollins, like Sonny Rollins, when I've heard him live at his best, he could have gone on endlessly. Developing ideas, and it never sounds like a single thing he ever did in a practice room. Yep. So when I first knew Tuck, there was a point where I had records out and I was getting big reviews, and Tuck and Patty, nobody had ever heard of them. They hadn't recorded. I remember I had mentioned them. I always have been trying to spread the word about them, and I would tell people in my classes in New York, and almost everybody would have a blank face, except there'd be one or two people in the class who I immediately knew were from the Bay Area. Because they're like, oh my God, you know them, they're the most incredible musicians, you know. But early on, Tuck was really like a chameleon. If you ask him to play just like, and then name any instrument, or I should say an instrument, any guitarist, really? He could do it. Wow. But the crazy thing was that it wasn't so obvious what his style was, because he was so good at doing everything. You know, the actor Peter Sellers was so good at imitating accents of other people sitting at tables next to his. And I remember hearing a few people say they knew him for a long time, but they never knew what his voice sounded like. They only heard it, you know, he was such a chameleon. So I don't mean that Tuck was that extreme, but it wasn't even clear to me if Tuck had done a record back then, what style would he even play? He could have done all kinds of things. And then when he and Patty hooked up, I don't know how, if you played with duos with vocalists very much?
Yeah, sure, a lot, yeah.
Right, so you know how it's this nutty thing, it's like...
I used to transcribe, I tried to transcribe, like, you know, Honeybee and, you know, whatever he played with Patty and... all this, I just couldn't figure out how he, his style.
Right.
I was like, shit, I've tried, I probably failed, but still. But sorry.
Yeah. So at first he was like the rest of us mortals, except a little better. But you know, all of the crazy things where it was, you could kind of struggle and make the music hold together, but there was stuff he wanted to hear that he wasn't hearing. So of course he applied himself, and that was the catalyst that made him develop this whole style that you know. Because when people think of Tuck, if I say, well, I got to give it up to George Benson, but other than George Benson, maybe Tuck is the person with the most amazing right-hand picking of anyone I know. Most people have never heard him play with a pick, so they're like, he doesn't play with a pick, he just plays fingerstyle. So you know.
I haven't heard him with the rhythm section as well, right? I mean, I would love to hear him play with a drummer and a bass player, like just standards or something, you know, like.
Sure. And by the way, I have a fantasy. I shouldn't say this in public because I don't want to put on the spot. But I mean, I hope someday I'll do a duo record with Tuck. Oh, it'd be wonderful to do it with him. That. And he and I have, even though he's such an inspiration and influence, he and I have gone really different ways. So I mean, our styles are totally different. Anyway.
Rory, I wanted to ask you, speaking of talk, how did you end up on that Paradise Found record, your tune? How did they pick up that Lembranzas?
Yeah, Lembranzas. Well, Patty talking. They're both like very dear friends, and I've gone and stayed with them some, and I mean we've been in touch a lot. When my records come out, they get them. Actually, sometimes what's happened is I'll do a recording and I'm trying to choose between tracks or which tunes to use, whatever. I'll send them. So they've heard my stuff a lot, and there are a lot of my tunes that they've liked, but I never thought that they were going to actually write words and do one.
Yeah,
and of course, if you listen to how I play Lembranzas how they play it, it's very different. But I mean, but I do want to say one thing about them playing Lembranzas. The recording they have of it is terrific, but I went and heard them a few times in the year or two after they made that recording, when they were playing that regularly in their concerts. And the way that tune evolved and grew, because remember, first of all, they're incredibly talented and they're playing a lot. Like I think in 2 years, they had played that tune more than I have in my whole life. So each time I would hear it, it was like, whoa, like it had, and this is something they actually work on doing with every tune. Like for them, a tune isn't just another random page in the fake book with, like My Romance is My Romance. That's a whole different world than, Dearly Beloved. I mean, it's a whole different world. And wow, I wish there were recordings of them playing Lembranzas live like a year and a half or so after they recorded it, because that was like really astounding. Yeah. So yeah, I'm pleased that they've done that. I have a lot of other tunes I would love for them to do sometime. I have to say, so far I'm not what I would call the best lyricist. In fact, I'm kind of making a joke about it because it's like, you might not want to sing my lyrics, but in fact, I'd love to find a great lyricist to work with. Well, anyway, I guess you get the idea that there's a lot in my life that I want to do still. I'm pretty motivated. I'm pretty hardworking, and you never know what opportunities come up. But
absolutely, yeah.
But certain things like that the 21st Century Funk Band. I mean, it's so impractical. It's almost as crazy as trying to get a big band together and go on tour with it.
Yeah.
But when I was on this Fulbright in Iceland, I discovered that there were some very good musicians in Iceland.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And if you haven't been to Iceland, the crazy thing, have you been to Iceland?
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's what is it? It's fewer than 400,000 total population.
Yeah.
And often the size of a place has some relationship. If you're talking about something that's very obscure, like being an Olympic level 100-meter track runner, or being like a great jazz trombone player, things like that, you would expect that places with more people, those kind of freaky people that are great at it, there are more people from which they're going to pop out. But Iceland surprised me. There's some good musicians there, really good. And my buddy there, whose university I did stuff at, I said, I've been thinking about putting together this larger ensemble, and I started talking to him about, tell me about the trumpet players here. Tell me about, and I ended up putting together a 9-piece group. I wrote a dozen arrangements for this. We didn't end up playing all of them, but it was great. We played a couple concerts. They did a fantastic job. So it goes into my spreadsheet. I got those tunes performed, but of course not recorded. And I'll tell you another, the not recorded category just pops in my head. In 2005, the university I was at offered that I could do a faculty concert. So the thing about a faculty concert is you're supposed to use either at least one alumni member, one person who's been through the school, or one person who's just a current student. I'm thinking, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to use students. So I had two current students, great vocalist named Gene Rowe, you might not have heard, but the other great vocalist, Becca Stevens. These were current students. No one had ever heard of them. And then the other people were people who had taken my classes, Robert Glassford, John Ellis, Matt Penman. And then I had one person who wasn't a student, Daphnis Prieto, because I had started playing with Daphnis, and I thought, like, Daphnis is so great. He'd be good for this.
Killing.
And sorry, I just carry on about this quickly because it's an interesting lesson for the people that haven't really jumped into the jazz world. You know, people worry a lot about mistakes, and people also, a young musician, even a young jazz musician, makes a mistake and they go, oh God, you know. So one of my incredibly powerful memories was a big catastrophe that happened in this concert. So I'll tell you what it was. So I had written, I thought, like, wow, I love these musicians. I'm going to write some crazy stuff for them. So I wrote this 51.5-minute long suite. Now, everybody already had such busy lives. I never was able to rehearse with the whole group at the same time. So I would go and do something with the vocalist and Robert and something, you know, different configurations. So people had, you know, and I knew these people were going to be great, you know, they were going to be fine, but it's still, you know, we've got this one shot to play this long piece. You know, you don't really want to have it fall apart and have to count off the G section, right? So, but everything's going magically. It was great, just beautiful. And then there was this one place where Daphnis and I did an a cappella 7/4 vocal percussion duet. And Gene and Becca come in there and they start doing this thing which leads them to singing a written thing in 7. Anyway, and then the band comes in, and this is part of the arrangement, right? So Daphnis and I do the duet, and then Gene and Becca start singing. And it took a moment because it kind of was interesting, like what was happening. And then I can't say for the other people, but I was near Robert. Robert and I both, I could tell we both realized, like, oh shit, they're in the wrong key.
Oh shit.
And by the way, I mean, these were vocals on a level like you never had experienced that happening. There's no way that's going to happen. And they're in the wrong key. And it was like, it's a big, long, dark tunnel, but in the distance you see the headlights and it's an oncoming train, and you can't leave you know, you're just watching, and it's going to be a disaster. And I mean, what's going to happen? The whole thing's going to fall apart, you know. And so it's just unfolding. And just when the train's about to hit and kill us, this thing happened. Robert did this quick little, like just probably a few beats, you know, thing leading into what we're going to play. The vocalists are so hip, they immediately realized, oh, we're in the wrong key.
Oh, wow.
And we did this modulation, and one of the vocalists, I'm not even sure which one it was, one of the vocalists like couldn't help it, you know, they're like laughing out loud. That moment, the catastrophe that became, I mean, I couldn't have written that beautiful modulation, that beautiful moment. Like, oh, you know, that's one of my, if you talk about specific moments that I remember in music that were just incredible, that was one of them. And Becca's dad for years would listen to the recording and get to that place, and it's like, you know, so you know, when Herbie Hancock tells this anecdote about, you know, playing the wrong chord, and Miles plays the thing that makes it right. Man, I know what he's talking about, you know.
Yeah.
Like how you know, that's the thing about jazz. You know, if I had been in a classical recital and something, you know, it's a disaster. You know, you got to start over again. I mean, I've seen that happen in classical performances. It's terrible. And the idea that it's so magical in jazz, boy, if you're ready to ride the wave and the wave goes some crazy place, that might be the most
Absolutely.
wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Incredible.
but that's another example. I mean, I have a recording of that concert, but the people on the board didn't really mix it quite right, you know. And I remember naively at the time, I thought, wow, that was so much fun. One of these days we should record this. Of course, by now everyone's stars and, you know, be incredibly difficult. And I think the time maybe has passed. It would be fun still, but so there's a lot of that kind of thing. But I think it's good. I think documenting this stuff is kind of
Absolutely.
important.
Yep.
I'll tell you a quick Sonny Rollins thing, if you're okay with me just rambling on
Yeah,
anecdotes.
sure.
So Armen Donelian played
Yeah, you're a piano player.
played with my quartet for a long time. I've had a bunch of friends who played with Sonny Rollins. Armen played with Sonny. Michael Wolf, beautiful pianist I love playing with, he played with Sonny. And Mark Soskin, who I
Sure.
did a Poland workshop with, great guy, played with Sonny a lot. But I'm pretty sure this was Armen who told me this story. They were playing, he knows the name of the club, I don't remember, it's this little place in Boston area. And this is the era where the band had electric bass and electric piano. And some crazy thing happened and the electricity went out in the middle of a song. Sonny's playing, power goes out. The drummer is playing, Sonny plays, and after a few bars, the drummer stops playing. So basically, mere mortal musicians are like, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we'll start again when the power goes on. But Sonny kept on playing and playing and playing. And it was a long time. I think Armen told, maybe it was like 45 minutes or something. And Sonny kept playing. And you know, sometimes if you just listen to the way someone tells a story, you can feel a little bit of it. Armen said that was the most amazing experience I ever had playing with Sonny Rollins when I couldn't play because the electricity went out. You know, it's like stuff like that. You wish it were on record.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
but the people who lived through it had that experience.
Absolutely.
There's a story in Herbie Hancock's autobiography. You know this one about one time when the Mwandishi band had this magical thing, and somebody robbed the van and stole the tape.
Yeah.
You know, but anyway, you know, it's there's nothing like the live experience of the music,
Absolutely.
but it's great when you can document some of those things. You know, 100 years from now, if Herbie had that Mwandishi recording still, I bet it would still be great 100 years from now. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
this is all carrying on about your theme about I got to release some more recordings. Got to get on it.
That was question number one. Check.
Right. Now 10 hours from now, when you get to question number 3, no, I'm just kidding.
No. I think we'll do that like when you come to Europe with a bottle
No,
of
I'm just
wine
teasing.
on my terrace. So
Yeah, but I can try to be more concise in my answers to any other questions you have.
no. I mean, it's like it's nice. Nice. It's, for me, these talks are like free impros in a way. Just like I usually draw, play a
Yeah.
note and then let's see what happens. So no,
Yeah.
nice to hear you talk about these things. Because it's all. Yeah, it's all matters in a way. I love doing this interview just for that, just to hear.
Hey, I know you've interviewed so many people,
Yeah.
and maybe I haven't gotten to check them all out yet. Have you ever interviewed Lionel Loecki?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's an interesting guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Like I have former students who are some of my favorite young guitarists. And I'm sure you know many of them. Gilad Hexelman, Mike Moreno, Yotam Silverstein, Camila Mesa,
Yep.
Mary Halverson. I mean, it's a long list of these folks, but I find it interesting. A lot of people know about those folks and don't know about Lionel, which
Yeah.
is funny how would you not know about Lionel? Because he's touring with Herbie Hancock.
Yeah, exactly.
But for some reason, I'm not sure what it is, but I found some young guitarists where they're asking like, who are some current people that you dig? And I said, man, Lionel Loecki, that's like a very original, beautiful style. It's just his,
Absolutely original. Yeah.
And they're like, no, what's his name? I've never heard of him. I don't know him very well. He's a beautiful guy. I remember he and I mean, we know each other a little bit. I remember I was doing this thing in Italy in this hotel, and Herbie's group was staying in the hotel. He had just played a concert. I think I left a message for him, and at 2 a.m, he calls up my room. We had this wonderful conversation, and then around 3, he said, "Oh, the van's leaving. We got to go. This is 3 a.m. They're going to take the van to the next place. So I got to run. Anyway, I'm glad you interviewed him because
he's a really nice guy. We did a master class together like 4 years ago, and we hung out quite some. And
that's
he's
great.
Such a sweet cat, like really.
He's
nice.
such a sweet cat, and it's so. It's just so. It's so Lionel, He's not trying to be somebody else.
Him now. That's who he is,
And it's also interesting because I remember, I'm sure I use a few examples of his in my books, and he's a guy who can play in 17, and you easily don't even notice it's 17. It's just
no. And then he sings the melody.
It's so natural and so easy, and it's just there's no struggle. It's just It's in there.
I love that stuff. Yeah. Well, I saw a solo gig by him, and he does like this 17, whatever, 13 groove, and then he's singing like this kind of like rubato melody over it, and like doing the clicks, like.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, man, this is so heavy, and he goes, yeah, I don't know, it's natural. I was like, come on, man, it's just you're like, okay.
I guess I've never really understood, there's this thing that happens where older musicians, they kind of love the style that's their style from that period.
Yeah.
And there's a long history of this. You probably know those things like, what was it, like Louis Armstrong calling Parker and Gillespie and saying this, like now it would be something different, but like it was a disparaging, that's Chinese music. I mean, at that age, at that time, that was like saying like it's strange, but I mean, like it's often the case that people aren't open to stuff, and I don't get that, because to me, like finding new things that are wonderful, that stretch you, that's incredible.
Yeah, I agree.
But it must be interesting, the whole thing teaching there. Because the students are mostly probably from Slovenia, right?
Yeah. It's mostly from my town, Maribor. So.
Yeah.
But many of them then went to study to Graz and Klagenfurt and Linz and Berlin, and they have their own bands now. They release CDs. So it's not at the level like not Robert Glasper, but still, they're making contributions, and I'm really happy when I see them. Like, oh shit, man, he's writing tunes, he's doing gigs, and he's doing well. So it's a nice feeling, and to open people up, and
it's such a crazy. Well, not to go off topic, but it's such a crazy moment in the world to me right now. The thing that's happening politically in the U.S., like it's.
Yeah, that's insane, man. That's it's like
and it's interesting because there's a lot of this music. When Coltrane wrote the tune Alabama, I mean, things are situated in certain things, and it's when people do fake books or books of transcriptions, the whole cultural thing is stripped away, and it's just, here's what the notes are, but it's such a crazy thing, and climate change, and people talk about climate change a lot, but also the loss of biodiversity. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff in the world that's really nutty now, and
absolutely.
Once in a while it occurs to me things like, I assume 100 years from now, if there are humans alive, they're going to be listening to John Coltrane. I assume, but I mean, once in a while I think, wow, what if young people, nobody's interested in jazz anymore, and all this stuff just gets left behind? I don't know. So, and it's such a wonderful thing. So it just makes me happy, whether it's me going to a library in Birmingham, Alabama, and playing and having people walk up, say, I came here because it was like a free concert, but I've never listened to jazz before. That's really interesting, and they're asking me questions. If it's that, or if it's you getting a young guitar student in Slovenia, it's a beautiful thing. So it's great if we can share it, for sure. Absolutely. Which obviously, doing all of these podcasts, you're doing a lot.
I mean, it's just like like you saying 100 years from now. I'm just going sometimes through my music collection, like how to contact people. That's why I contacted you also because, I was like, oh shit, this CD, and then I sent you an email, and
Yeah,
because and it's scary how many musicians it's out there who are band leaders and composers, and the list of people I would love to talk to is still. My wife asked me the other day, like, yeah, well, are you approaching slowly the end? I'm like, no, like. I'm like
yeah,
at number 500, but there's like 2,000 more or something, like, and
yeah,
and it's like creating this archive of hopefully someone in 60 years will listen. I would
yeah.
love to hear an interview with I don't know, Booker Little or Eric Dolphy, and they don't exist, because
I'll
you
give
know,
you an example of something that I wish it existed. Grady Tate,
yeah,
drummer,
yeah,
although
sure,
late in his life he sang some. Grady Tate, we used to have, when my university was at its height, one of the best programs in the world, we had a series where different artists would come in, and it was called Eyes of the Masters, and people would kind of do what they wanted. So one person might talk about the music business, one person might play with the students, one person might tell anecdotes. I mean, it was like an empty slate,
carte
and
blanche,
they
yeah.
would just do what they wanted. And Grady Tate came, and it was the most riveting 2 hours ever. And but Grady Tate had so many stories because Grady, whether it's playing with Wes Montgomery or Oliver Nelson or Ahmad Jamal, but it wasn't just the stories, it was his ability as a storyteller. And at one point, one of the students a little timidly raised their hand and asked this question, and I can't remember how they asked it, but it was a little bit squirrely, but Grady understood what they were saying, and he said, "Yeah, I know what you mean." He said, "When I started out, my intention was to become a Shakespearean actor." So this guy, he could do incredible impressions of any musician. He could speak beautifully, articulately, and this is a funny thing. I've noticed this thing about public speaking, like people are speaking. And they might be speaking about a very emotionally fraught thing, but they're suppressing it because they're talking to the public. You can tell that sometimes you can tell they're working to not feel that thing. And of course, really great actors and actresses, sometimes it's the opposite. You can feel this, like, wow, how are they Well, Grady, you could tell he could really be in the moment of the experience while he's talking about it. I mean, when he talked about the moment he found out Wes Montgomery died, I mean, I was almost in tears because you could feel how much this guy personally loved Wes Montgomery. I always had this impression Wes Montgomery was a lovely, warm guy, but you had to hear Grady Tate describe this to realize, like if Wes Montgomery had only been a factory worker and hadn't been a guitarist, he was still going to be a person where people were like, oh, Wes, and he was so beautiful. And I mean, when Grady Tate talked about the first time he got a gig with Ahmad Jamal, the first tune they played, and then at the piano, Grady Tate did it, and Ahmad Jamal went, and then he played this arpeggio from low to high, and took his hands off the piano and gave a big smile, and you could tell he's imitating Ahmad Jamal smiling at Grady, and Grady played something. He said, "I knew it was going to be a beautiful night." The way that Ahmad Jamal would bring his rhythm section. Anyway, I remember at that time I thought, someone's just got to get a camera on this guy for 2 hours. People are going to want to, but I don't think anyone ever did. I actually looked on the internet. I could never find Grady Tate or interviews or whatever. So thank you for getting a bunch of us more or less obscure.
Oh wow,
Talking about stuff that's great.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I love it, man. But
there's all kinds of musical stuff we haven't talked about, but I know you might be running out of time here.
Yeah, I think I slowly have to go up because my wife will be otherwise like,
Yeah.
She brought her kid to bed, and I was like, yeah, I'll be up in an hour or something.
Yeah.
Man, if you're gonna be in Europe, Rory, just drop me a line, or something. We get together, or we have really a guest room here. You can easily stay here. And
thanks. Do you end up coming to New York some still?
After COVID, I haven't.
Okay.
Before COVID, I came every year for a month or two, and
Yeah.
but after COVID, I somehow,
Well, one way or another, let's
We should get
keep in
together.
touch, and it'd be great to see you in person, whether it's you coming here or me
Absolutely.
going there.
Absolutely. I'll let you know when
Excellent.
this is out and everything, and I'll send you a link. And so,
Oh, I have a goofy question. So when I looked at a few of these, I saw these little cartoon sketches you have of the people. You do them.
yeah, I'll do one of you as well. I'll send it for approval first. No, I'm kidding.
Some of them are pretty amazing, actually.
Some are
Like you
good,
really
some are like, yeah, I could have done better.
No, but some of them you really capture the people well. It's great.
Yeah, it's heavy but sometimes.
Very cool.
I love
And of
music.
course, I should check out more of your stuff. So if you want to point me to some things I should listen to.
Oh, I'll send you some links on by
Great.
mail, so.